Welcome to this explainer. Let's just jump right in, because today we're doing something a little different. We're going to completely strip away that shiny corporate polish, put the standard operating procedures on the back burner for a minute, and have a raw, completely unfiltered conversation about the actual reality of project management right down in the trenches. No fluff, no perfectly formatted theoretical scenarios where everyone agrees, just the messy, honest reality of what it actually takes to survive and thrive when everything completely goes off the rails.
Think about this for a second. If you could sit down with your younger self for just 1 hour, what conversation would fundamentally change the trajectory of your career? I want you to really think about that. Because out there right now, there are fresh project managers sitting in the middle of absolute chaos, staring at their monitors and quietly wondering, wait, why didn't anyone prepare me for this? You know, they've done the training, they've read all the manuals, but they are sitting there feeling completely, utterly lost.
And that's because there is a massive and honestly pretty painful gap between what you learn in the classroom and what you actually do on the floor. On one side, you've got textbook PM training. It gives you these ideal standard operating procedures, neat little dictionary definitions, and perfect roadmaps. But let's be real, those perfect roadmaps, they rarely survive first contact with an actual client. Because the second you graduate and step onto the floor, you're hit in the face with real-world reality, client panic, messy exceptions, escalations that seem literally impossible to solve. The standard certification courses offer this sterile illusion of how work gets done. But actual field work? It's chaotic, it's uncertain, and it requires a completely different mindset if you want to survive.
Which naturally leads us to this incredibly valid question. Why does nobody teach this stuff? It is beyond frustrating to deal with a real-world crisis where your textbook SOP completely falls apart in your hands. I mean, thousands of training programs will teach you the exact definition of a metric, but almost nobody explains how experienced project managers actually think when it's 5 p.m. on a Friday and the project is literally imploding. That gap right there, the gap between the theoretical definition and practical survival, is exactly what we are going to bridge today.
All right, let's take an example. Let's look at an actual real-world crisis.
4%. Just hearing that number can induce sheer panic. Imagine you're running an online sampling study. The original bid assumption, the expectation that everyone signed off on, was a 30% incidence rate, meaning we expected 30 out of 100 people to qualify. But you launch the study, and you are staring at a 4% incidence rate. The study is dying. This is the exact moment panic sets in. And guess what? Knowing the dictionary definition of an incidence rate does absolutely nothing for you right now. It's completely useless. So, when that 4% reality hits, you basically see two reactions. The novice freezes at the symptom. They panic, they open their email, and they start quoting textbook definitions to a very angry client. But the veteran? The veteran sees a feasibility problem wearing a clever disguise as a sampling problem. An experienced PM doesn't freeze at the symptom. They instantly reframe this crashing metric so they can hunt down the real root cause. It's a completely different way of seeing the exact same problem.
Okay, so how exactly does the veteran hunt down that root cause? Well, they treat it like a detective story. They dive right into the messy variables. They're looking for hidden quotas that might be silently blocking users. They're analyzing the entire respondent flow, and they might notice that security terms, things like bot checks or complex CAPTCHAs, are suddenly causing a massive 70% fallout rate. They review the original bid assumptions to figure out exactly where the mismatch started, all while formulating a crystal-clear strategy for stakeholder communication. See, professional growth doesn't happen when the project goes exactly right. It happens right here, in the middle of building a case and analyzing these incredibly messy exceptions.
Which brings us to a core thesis drawn straight from our source material, and I absolutely love this. Messy is where the gold is. Standard procedures can only teach you the ideal, but true compounding professional growth, that comes entirely from navigating the chaotic exceptions. When you finally learn how to solve the problems that aren't printed in the manual, that's the exact moment you evolve from someone who just follows instructions into someone who actually guides the project.
Now, navigating that mess requires a very specific leadership trait, and we call it operational empathy. This simply means acknowledging another person's constraints and frustrations without surrendering your own position. This is the secret to navigating an impossible client escalation. It's how you tell a client, hey, your study is fundamentally broken and impossible to deliver, without actually burning the professional relationship to the ground. You understand their pressure, for sure, but you stand firm on the reality of the situation.
And when it is time to have that really tough conversation, here is your absolute unbreakable rule of crisis management. Never, ever escalate without evidence. Look, when panic sets in, the natural human urge is to fire off an emotional, highly reactive email. Do not do it. You have to strip the emotion entirely out of your communications and rely on cold, hard data.
So, in practice, what does an evidence-based escalation actually look like? First, you pull the hard field stats and the IR data. Second, you review exactly where the fallout is happening, pinpointing those failing security terms or broken quotas. And third, you don't just present the problem and walk away, you propose concrete fixes and viable solutions. This right here is how a seasoned PM replaces raw panic with practical wisdom. You aren't just delivering bad news, you are delivering a documented reality alongside a very clear path forward.
And as you're drafting that email, repeat this mantra to yourself. Teach, don't impress. We've got to ditch that corporate urge to write these fluffy, jargon-packed emails. Your goal isn't to look like a vocabulary expert or sound impressive. Focus instead on writing crystal clear emails that actually move the project forward. Honestly, if your email doesn't help someone make a better decision, it's just noise.
Why? Because communication is a direct consequence of your thinking. If your email is a confusing mess, it's usually because your own thought process hasn't been resolved yet. Don't try to polish your words before you've actually clarified your thoughts. When you analyze the problem clearly, when you collect the data, interpret the fallout, and map out a solution, better thinking naturally and effortlessly produces better communication.
All of this culminates in what we call the Day One philosophy. It's basically an operating system built straight from the trenches. And it's pretty simple. First, focus is everything, so close one milestone before even thinking about opening the next. Second, stop worrying about optimizing Phase 3 when Phase 1 is currently on fire. And above all, treat those messy exceptions as your greatest learning opportunities. These aren't just cheesy LinkedIn hustle quotes, okay? These are highly practical mental models born from late-night, real-world fieldwork.
This ultimately leaves you with a major career choice. Are you going to be the corporate influencer, completely obsessed with applause, vanity metrics, and just looking busy? Or are you going to be the dedicated craftsman? The craftsman is obsessed with the quality of their work, relying on evidence, and quietly solving those impossible escalations. Mastering project management requires the relentless, quiet dedication of a craftsman, not the superficial desire to just chase clout.
Because at the end of the day, your brand is just a consequence of your authenticity. If you want to be known as an authority in the space, if you want people to really trust you, you can't fake it. Trust and authority compound naturally when you focus on being a true craftsman. People will know, just by the way you dissect a problem, that you have genuinely survived the trenches. They're going to trust you because your advice is firmly rooted in real messy experience. So, let's wrap this up with a question you really need to ask yourself. Are you just optimizing for the ideal process, or are you actually mastering the messy exceptions? It's time to stop relying on textbook training to save you when things go completely wrong. Lean into the chaos. Analyze the anomalies. Because those messy exceptions, that is exactly where your real growth happens. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you in the trenches.